morning, everyone. My name is Emily. I'm our Director of Programs here at Attollo Prep. I also lead our Professional Development Series. And today we have Jennifer Diaz, the Executive Director for Leadership Lancaster with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
So Jen, just to kick us off, would you tell us where you are from and what were some of your interests growing up?
Yeah, so I was born in Pottstown, which is in Chester County, about an hour from here. And growing up, my family was very musical. So my dad was a music teacher and a jazz musician. Mom played piano and organ. And so the rule in our family was you had to learn how to play piano, and you also had to pick another instrument. So I chose the alto saxophone. And so the cadence in our household is that you had to wake up very early and you had to practice one of those instruments before school for at least a half an hour. And then as soon as you got home from school, you had to practice the other instrument. And I will tell you, growing up, I thought this was horrible. I thought I had the worst parents in the world. But I will say, as an adult now, I am a morning person. I love that has been ingrained in me, that art of practicing and getting better at something. So it's come full circle.
Is this something that you still do?
I do. I actually have a little baby grand in my living room, and so much to my children's dismay, some mornings when I'm feeling really stressed, I'll just bang out something, and
so fun.
That's how you wake up.
Yeah, concert every day. I first want to say congratulations on joining Leadership Lancaster in April of 2024 as the Executive Director. I was wondering, how did you find Leadership Lancaster and what drew you to this type of career?
Yeah, it actually is a story that started back when I went to Millersville University. So went to Millersville, got a degree in social work, and wanted to stay in Lancaster County, and so I needed to find a way to get involved in the community. And I had a flyer sent to me, and it said that there was this big community gathering and everyone was invited, and they were starting a new nonprofit. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. I want to go be a part of this. Went to this meeting, 25, I'm young. I walk in this room and it is like every leader in Lancaster County, every pastor, and I'm super intimidated. And so I sit there and I hear about this vision for this nonprofit, and I'm thinking, this is so great. This is what I want to do. And at the end of the meeting, they said, we're going to select 12 people from this room to be on the board of directors. And then, we'll let you know in the future if there's some way you can be involved. And I thought, wow, I'd really want to be on this board of directors, but there's no way they're going to choose me. They don't know who I am. I'm young. So I go home, and 3 weeks later, I get this letter in the mail. And it says, thanks for coming. We've selected a board of directors, right? And we'll let you know if there's anything else you can do. And I don't know if you've ever had like that little voice in your head. And this little voice started saying, you need to be on that board of directors. And I was like, well, that's fabulous, but they've already chosen the board. What am I going to do? Call and ask to be on this board? And this annoying voice was like, yeah, that's exactly what you're going to do. And I'm like, there's no way. I'm not doing this, right? How humiliating is that? So I put the letter away, and this voice would not stop. You need to be on this board of directors. So I pulled the letter back out, and I dialed the phone number, and this 6-year-old answers the phone. And mind you, I didn't want to do this. I thought this was humiliating and embarrassing. So I thought the best course of action was, what if I explained to this 6-year-old why I'm calling? He can leave a note for his dad, explain it to him. Dad can call, say no, and leave a message on my voicemail, and then I don't have this public humiliation. So I spend about 5 minutes explaining to this 6-year-old why I'm calling, I want to be on this board of directors. And he finally just says, why don't you call back later? And he hangs the phone up on me. So I knew I wasn't going to get out of this, called back later that night, actually talked to this guy, and I just took a deep breath and I said, I know this sounds odd, but I really feel like I'm supposed to be on this board of directors. Would there be a chance of that happening? And to my surprise, he said yes, told me to come to the next meeting. And I started on that board of directors, and they hired me as their executive director for this new nonprofit. And as I stepped into that role, somebody said to me, hey, there's this program called Leadership Lancaster. You should really apply for this program. It'll help you build your network. You'll understand the community better. You'll get to meet a lot of the leadership. So back in 2000, I applied for Leadership Lancaster, and I went through the core class. And I will say, for me, it was one of the most transformational experiences that I've had to date. Our core class has a cohort experience, so there were 45 other leaders that I was with for 9 months. So you build these rich relationships. I still am friends with a lot of those people. You are connected to leaders throughout the community. I understood kind of the systems and how they kind of coexisted. And truly, it was really what started my career pathway. So to come back, 25 years later, and now be the executive director, and to be able to really set the vision and the future for this organization so others have this opportunity is just a blessing.
Wow, I really appreciate how full circle your story is. I'm curious, you have a degree in social work. You are currently not a social worker.
True.
As a nonprofit that focuses on college access and leadership, could you talk to us about why you pursued a degree in social work at Millersville, and then how you have found your degree to still be helpful even if it's not the direct career path you're in?
Yeah, so I chose the career pathway of social work, and it's another story, so I apologize, but I was at an event when I was 16, and there was a young man who had written a book. His name was Trevor, and he, at the age of 5, had seen homeless people on the news, decided he wanted to take his blanket down and share it with a homeless person. This led to him starting a nonprofit organization. And I, at 16, got to go and be a part of this organization that went down into Philadelphia, and we got to go serve people. We got to hand out food, and it was just really a pivotal moment for me for going, this is what I want to do. I want to find a way to help people. And one of the things that happened that night is we ran out of food as we were serving people. And I thought to myself, like, there's got to be more that I can do. There has to be something else. And so I remember sitting down on the sidewalk and just starting to talk to people and listening to their stories. And there was this moment where I was like, this is what I can do. I can hold space for other people's stories. I can help them get to that next best step in their life. And so from there, just started researching, okay, what does that look like in a career? And found out that it was social work, and Millersville was one of 4 universities that I had looked at. And so that's how I got to Millersville. And then as far as kind of the shift, it's always been the backbone of everything that I've done. What I learned when I got out, I started to do casework, and I started to work with people, and I realized very quickly that I was not wired for that. I could not separate. I would take all of that pain and that story home with me. And so I was like, okay, but I need to somehow still be helping people. And then I learned that you can actually lead people. You can lead organizations, and you can help propel other people to do that hands-on work. And so that's kind of how I stepped into the more administrative role of social work and nonprofit. I've been in nonprofit for 35 years now.
As an executive director, you're in a very prominent leadership position. How do you make time for yourself when you are overseeing so many people?
I love that you had this question because it's one of my passion projects. I didn't always make time for myself, and I learned really the hard way. I started out in my career and I started doing all the things, and I just found there wasn't time. There wasn't time for me, but that's okay. Got married, kids, 4 kids, and it got even worse. And I was getting to the point where I was simply enduring through the day, and I was just trying to make it to the evening, and I got up and I would do it all again. I did this for years. And I had a day, I was driving to work, and I had just dropped off 4 kids at 3 different schools. And I was going, all the things you think about in the car, like who's going to make dinner tonight, who's picking up this kid, how am I going to get that deadline done? And I could just feel the anxiety building in the car. And I had a thought, and the thought was, wouldn't it be great if I got into a car accident, right? Nothing serious, just something that would put me in the hospital for a couple of days so I would have no choice but just to rest and relax. And that was like my pivotal moment. I pulled the car over, I was shaking, and I thought to myself, how did I get here? Like, how did I get to this point in my life where my only option for rest and relaxation is to pull the car over and think, oh, what if I got in a car accident and went to a hospital? And I decided right then and there on the end of the side of the road that I was going to find my way back to a healthy version of me, to a work-life balance. And it literally started me on this 10-year journey of really defining what does that look like for me and what are the supports and changes that I needed to make in my life to get there.
Can you talk about maybe what I'm assuming is you didn't always get it right?
Yeah.
I can't imagine you going from that moment
Yeah.
to immediate work-life balance. So what was that journey of trial and error like? And part of the reason I ask is, 1, I would love some advice, but 2, just so other people, especially our students, can hear that you can have a desire to change and you might not see that right away.
Yep. And I think it's so important too, if you start this early, it's so much better on the other side of your kind of career pathway. But I actually started by going back to my social work roots. So when I was working with clients, it was, okay, if you have to look at a person holistically. You have to look at them mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And you can't just look at one of those systems because they're all intertwined. So if I was moving a person from point A to point B, we'd look at all those systems. So I'm like, well, why don't I run myself through the same exact process? So I did. I literally started with mental, because I thought that's where I needed the most help. And I got a therapist, like period, end statement. There is not a person alive that can't benefit from therapy. I tell every leader, every person that's in a C-suite position, you need a therapist, a physical trainer, and some kind of a life coach. I mean, that's just what you need to surround yourself with. And I started just to unpack a lot of the story and the stuff, and it took years to do that. And then I was like, okay, so I've got mental, I'm working in that area. So then I went to physical. And so as I shared with you, musical family, zero athletic ability, never played an organized sport in my entire life. And so I knew I needed something to get me outside, that I was going to push me. And so I thought, I'm going to train to do a half marathon. Because why not, right? I mean, no talent, I've never run except for in 5th grade when you do that mile run.
I love the mile
Only
run.
time, yeah, I did awful. And so I thought, okay, so I went out and I bought a book, because that's what I always do. I research, and I bought a pair of running shoes. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get out there, and it's going to be great, that runner's high. And I made it about halfway around the block, and I hated it. It was awful. It was clunky. I do not have a natural running build. And I went back inside, and I realized unless I signed up for something and paid money for it, I knew I was going to quit any physical activity. So I went online, and again, without any forethought, I signed up for the Baltimore Half Marathon. And so I started very slowly, one time around the block, 2 times. I found a running group. I tore my Achilles, so I had to rehab that. Like, it was the ups and downs, but I was like, I am going to do this. And I started with the half marathon. I did that. That led me on to do some triathlons and some other crazy things. But for me, physical was just as important as the mental. Getting up every morning, getting out of bed, making sure that I was putting time and energy into that. And then spiritual, I always say this looks different for everybody. I grew up with a very boxed-in theology, so I needed to really explore what that was. I studied Buddhism. I got a yoga certification. I went to Princeton Seminary and got my certificate in ministry and theology. Like, I just explored all the things and found for me what connected me. And then finally, emotional was probably the most work that I've done and the most trial and error. Because you can work in all those spaces and the life stuff is still going to happen, right? Mm-hmm. And so for me, the life stuff that was happening, I was going through a brutal divorce at this time. And so what I had to do is really figure out, how can I work on some of the things that trigger me throughout the day? And so I started having these anxiety attacks. And one of the things that I implemented, I call it 60-second intervals. And as soon as I could feel it coming on, I would sit on the ground and I would set my timer for 60 seconds. And I would just say to myself, is there anything happening in these 60 seconds? Is there anything happening to me in these 60 seconds? And truly, if you think about it, unless you're being chased by a bear, which then run, right? But there's typically nothing happening in those 60 seconds. Like, the things that I was anxious about had already happened, or they were going to happen. So it was truly understanding that, being present in this moment. And then the timer would go off, I'd set it again. And then I'd set it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, until it would go away. And then the other thing I started doing, I really started getting clear with my boundaries. So I also, as I was going through this, was working for a very toxic boss. And he had this amazing talent of sending these awful emails at all hours of the day and night. And I would read them, it would send me spiraling, I couldn't sleep. And so I realized that I couldn't control what people sent me, but I could control when I read it. And so I made a very clear rule that after 6:30, I was not reading any work emails, and then I would get up in the morning after getting a good night's sleep, and then I would deal with whatever that situation was. And I think the final thing that I did is I learned to say no. And I think that is the hardest thing that we learn throughout life. And then after I learned to say no, I learned to say hell no. And I'll tell you the difference, right? Because when I was saying no originally, I was still carrying the guilt around, right? Oh, I should have stayed late. I should have signed up to be on that board. I should have been the PTO president or the soccer mom or whatever. And I would still feel bad about it. And then I got to a point where I was like, no, my time and energy is so worth me setting those boundaries. And so I learned to just say hell no, and then just let that go.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm currently in my hold a sign at a half marathon era, not the running era.
Okay.
But I do love that with all of the different parts of yourself that you had to work on, there's an emphasis of the care team. And the people who are in support of that.
Right.
And that's something that I'm starting to realize is also really important, that
Absolutely.
I need to make time for the medical professionals in my life,
Yes.
for my therapist, for my life coach, all of those things.
Well, and what I found is that I studied a lot of leaders during that time, and the leaders who were just amazing at leadership had already figured this out, and they intentionally built time in their day for each of those areas. And then if you would look at leaders that were toxic, you'd realize they hadn't done any of the work, right? And so this is actually something that we have built into the curriculum at Leadership Lancaster, because I'm so passionate that you have to do this. Like, if I'm just taking 60 leaders through a program and in 9 months I'm dumping you in the community and you're not leading from a place of health, I am not helping the community at all. So we make sure they invest as much time in themselves as they are on community leadership.
So it really stems from making sure that you work it into your schedule and you don't leave it by chance.
Exactly. It has to be the priority.
Interesting. Okay. Now you talked about your 4 kids. I'm also one of 4, so bless your heart for dealing with us. I'm the second oldest.
Okay. Okay.
But my understanding is that you are the parent of an Attollo alum.
I am.
So I'm curious, what were your first impressions of our organization?
Yeah, so she's the second oldest too. So Emma went through, I think, about 3 years ago. And Emma is very creative, but has always been my introvert. And so first of all, when she came and said that she wanted to do this program, I was thrilled. And I was like, seriously, okay. So we show up for that very first gathering, and it's this room full of like amazing kids, but it's loud and there's lots of people. And I'm just looking at her going, okay, we're doing this. And she was committed to doing it. And I think for me, the greatest moment that I saw, and the moment of growth for her, is when you have to do the pitch. And I think their group had created some kind of a perfume
for startup.
And they're standing there in front of everyone, and she hated standing in front of people. She hated, public speaking. And one of the judges asked a question, and I'll tell you, she stood up like a girl boss, and she just answered that question. I was like, we're on the other side now, yes. And that's that life skill that she's going to have now, and that confidence for the rest of her life. So it was a great experience for her, yeah.
That's so fun. Startup is definitely one of my favorite programs to witness to see the kids who you never thought would get in front of a room, like scream their passions from, it's amazing. Okay, my next question for you. As a woman, how do you navigate being in spaces where you may not always feel welcomed? And you did share a story about how you attempted to just go through a 6-year-old to enter one of those spaces.
I've grown a little.
Very bold.
Then,
So I guess, how have you grown from asking a child?
Using toddlers? Well, use what you got. No, and I love that you had that question, because I've been in these situations many times, and especially when you're first starting out. So there's a scene in Ted Lasso. You see Rebecca, who owns the team, and she talks about when she goes into these spaces, how she goes into the bathroom and she gets big, right? And I always share that with my girls. I'm like, when you walk into a room, you've got to get big. You've got to own your space, and you've got to find your voice. And I had a speaking event probably a year ago, and it was this massive room, and there were speakers on before me, and the crowd was just like into their own conversations. They weren't paying attention. My 16-year-old had come with me, and she just turns to me and she goes, "Use your big girl voice, mama." And so I walked up and I grabbed the mic and I said to the tech guy, I'm going to lose the podium. I'm going to be out here. And I just used I got big, I owned the space, and I just started talking, and within 3 minutes, they were bought in and they had warmed to it. But it's about that idea of showing up and being like, no, I'm here and I know who I am, which is not necessarily easy. And so I think one of the strategies that I use is you've got to feel comfortable and confident when you show up in spaces. So one of my things is I'm 5'4". I am not tall. I work in a lot of spaces with men. And so you will rarely see me without a 4-inch heel on, because for me, it makes me feel confident. It kind of eliminates that height differential. And when I show up, I'm like, okay, here I am. Yeah.
You did speak on this a little bit, but I'm still struggling. How do you turn it on?
Yeah.
Like, where's the flip? I don't see it.
Yeah, no. And I think what I learned when I was reflecting on this question, when I started out in my career, I would walk into these rooms and there were just these big presences in the room, right? And they had big personalities. And I would sit at these tables and I hadn't found my voice yet. And so I would sit there and I would convince myself, okay, you need to interject here, you need to add something, and they would talk right over me. And I remember one specific meeting, I had tried several times just to add to the conversation. I was either talked over or I was silenced. And I just got real quiet and I got frustrated and I thought, I'm not giving my energy to this anymore. And there was an older woman at the end of the table, and she literally stopped the meeting. And she said, "Gentlemen, I have really enjoyed all your conversation today, but I'd really like to hear what Jennifer has had to say." And she nodded to me and she opened up the space for me to find my voice. And so it's just taking those moments when people give them to you and then just building on that. And so now that I've really stepped into my power, I mean, age does wonders for this, right? You get to this point, I'm 51 now. I'm like, I call it my forget at 50s. Like, I don't care. Like, I'll walk in, like, I know myself now. But it takes time to get there. So it's just taking those little gestures from people and trying to find your voice in those moments. And then it's paying it forward. So now when I'm in rooms like that, I'm really looking for people who haven't had that opportunity to give that back to them as well.
Again, I really appreciate that you go back to this theme of you need to lean on the people around you.
It is. It's about community, right? Treat every room as community when you walk in.
Ooh,
yeah.
That's a soundbite right there. I mean, I have more thoughts and questions, and I recognize that our audience also has a lot of thoughts and questions. So I'm curious, does anyone want to kick us off with a question? The mic is right there, Kirsten. Perfect.
Jen, I was wondering if you could talk about, it's common to see this, that growth can only happen with failure, disappointment, setbacks, and having been on part of your life journey with you, can you talk about that? I think, it almost has a cliche quality to it, but it's absolutely like a truth, that everyone sees the good stuff. You're obviously in a great sweet spot now, but it has not been straightforward. So I don't know if you even have a little story again to share about that.
I'll take it in two directions. I want to get back to Emma and kind of how that failure is so, and I hate the word failure. I really want to redefine that word. But Emma graduated from Attollo, went on all the college tours, and she chose Temple, which was great. We moved her in. I thought this was going to be a great fit for her. We got to the end of the first semester, and she was losing it mentally. And I said, what's going on? She's like, I'm just so behind. I'm not really meeting people. I said, okay, came home over Christmas break. Like, let's go back undecided. Like you don't have to know what you're doing. Let's just go back and see if we can get our feet under us. And she made it about 3 or 4 weeks and called, and it just was not worth the mental health of making her stay there. She wasn't learning anything from that. So I went and brought her back home. And so when we would go out for the next month, like I would have moms that would come up to her or other friends like, oh, how's Temple? And her response always was, oh, I had to drop out. And I said, okay, after the third time, I went, Em, let's reframe this. You didn't drop out. You found something that doesn't work for you, and now you're taking that next best step to figure out what does work for you. And so I think it's just to your point, Kirsten, like there is no failure in this. There's no right or wrong, and if anyone's telling you you have to know at this age what you're going to do, one, it makes me sad because figuring it out along the way is like what the fun part of life is, right? So just take that next best step, and if it doesn't work out, you found something that doesn't work for you. Great. There's a million other things that will work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Terry, did you have a question?
Yeah,
right there.
beautiful.
Thank you for this. I found this very, very interesting, and I really love your emphasis on team and community, and especially when you brought up like finding that care team around you. But I'm curious, beyond just like the people that I think are supporting you, like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of that, how do you know when you've found just a team of people as a leader, like as an organizational leader, that is like the right group of people? Because I know we always talk about like great leaders are surrounded by great people, but how do you know when you have great people?
Yeah. I have since the beginning been a very gut-led leader, meaning I can sit with you for 3 minutes and I'll know if you're a good fit for the team. And I always say I always hire for team, I don't hire for skill. We can teach you anything. It's about that space and building that team that really gels together. And so I think truly, it's trusting your gut. I think it's listening to that little voice that we talked about earlier and understanding you do know at the end of the day if this is a good fit for you energetically, if this is a good fit for you as far as culture. But that's how I've done it.
Makes sense. Thank you.
How has your philosophy on leadership changed through all the roles and all the things that you have done?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think when I first started out at a young age, I thought I didn't understand the power of community in leadership, and that you cannot lead unless you have community supporting you. And I think my number one thing that I have developed over at least the past decade is the power of building relationships and how incredibly valuable that is. I said the sentence earlier about when you walk into a room, treat every room like community. And I just did a talk on kind of just networking and this idea of building your network. And I think we've looked at leadership and networking and building that community as like, what can I get from people? And really, if we all shift that mindset to walking into a room and saying, how can I build a better community in here? Who can I introduce to somebody else that's going to make them better at what they do? And understanding by doing that you are making the community better, but you're also, that's going to come back to you, right? And I think my other piece is I have learned the value of just building one-on-one relationships. I stepped into this job probably 14 months ago. I have literally done at least 200 coffee meetings because it's this idea that relationships are currency, right? It's investing that time, even though it's very time consuming, to sit and hold space for somebody's story and then having them hear your story. And once you've made that connection, one, it's so much harder to dislike somebody once you've heard that story and built that relationship. And that's going to get you so much farther in leadership than any book can teach you, any master's degree or anything that you go on to do.
Thank you. Bemnet, do you have a question?
So I really appreciated, honestly, everything that you were sharing throughout. I appreciated your storytelling. I guess I'm curious, how do you use vulnerability within your leadership? And if it's something that doesn't necessarily come naturally to you, how have you built that skill?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have always believed that authenticity and vulnerability in leadership is a strength, right? And I think that there is a philosophy that that's not something that you should share in the workplace. And I worked as the chief culture officer for a while at my previous job, and one of the things that I brought into the space was this idea that if we begin to hold space for each other's stories, right, there's not this line anymore that, you know, between 9 to 5 you can only bring work stuff into this space. We all have story and stuff that we're carrying into every room, right? It impacts how we relate to people, it impacts how we communicate, it impacts our productivity. So my philosophy was, okay, so they're bringing it in anyway, let's create space for people to really be able to share that and then say, okay, how can I support you in that? And then how do we get this done, right? And there was a lot of pushback in the beginning of this idea, no, we can't do that here. If we are too vulnerable, people are going to see us as not good leaders. And to me, it's like when I share the struggles, and if you've followed any of my writing, I'm pretty authentic and vulnerable there because we're all doing that. When I share the story about the side of the road and thinking about, you know, what if I got into an accident, I can't tell you the number of CEOs who have walked up to me privately afterwards and said, I can't believe you said that, but thank you because I've had that same thought. We're all living these same exact lives. And so when we begin to share that, you begin to go, oh, I'm not alone in this. And then you start to build that community that you're supporting each other through it.
Part of what we want our scholars to be at the end of this programming is leaders in our community. So what would you leave them with one message is how to be better leaders in the Lancaster County community?
Oh, that's a great question. Man, I don't know if this will be fine. I feel like it's just being open to possibility. That I don't think it's going into it with the viewpoint of I want to be a better leader. I think it's this idea of I just want to be a better part of the community, right? So it's less about you and what you need, and it's more about how can I be a part of this entire community and making it better. And I just think, to me, that's been the shift for me. Like and you learn it, like early on you think, oh, I have to do all these things to make, you know, to move up this career pathway and this ladder. And I think my biggest takeaway is just take a breath, just enjoy where you're at. Look around and meet other people, hear the stories, hold space for people. And through that, you're going to be elevated, but so is the whole community as well.
Well, it sounds like in order to be a better leader in the Lancaster community, you have to actually get to know the community.
Absolutely, yes. That's a great takeaway, yeah.
I think it's great talking about, knowing the community and being one with the community, and that kind of makes you a better leader. I was just wondering, in terms of like working with you, being an intern and everything, seeing how all these chats and everything, has there been a moment where you actually realized, wait, I am a leader and people are actually listening to what I'm talking to, and then how you handle that kind of power of like, okay, people will listen to what I say, and how do I kind of navigate that route?
Was there one defining moment, is that what you're asking, of when I realized that people were following me? I don't know if there was one moment. I think it's just, what I love is when I share something, either whether it's in story or whether I'm leading a workshop or we're doing our core class, and then somebody communicates to me later that encouraged them to make a different choice or to try something, or it motivated them, then I'm like, okay, that's that sweet spot. All I can do is share the course that I've been on. All I can do is share my life experience, and I'm hoping that you'll take from that what will work for you. But I try not to look at it so much as like, oh, I know, because I don't know. I truly, just like everybody else in this room, I don't have the answers. But all I'm doing is taking kind of that next best step forward. And if you're going to follow along, that's awesome. Or if you find something in that motivates you to do something differently, then I go, okay, that's what I'm here to do.
Thank you, Seb. Terry.
Sorry, one more. I really appreciated Bemnet's question about authenticity and vulnerability. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, particularly about how you balance authenticity as a leader with like organizational pressures or expectations that might cause you to maybe have to put some of your values, things, ideas, maybe to the side in support of like a larger vision or something like that. It's just like, how do you strike that balance, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, I think as far as a balance of viewpoints, so Leadership Lancaster is a very apolitical organization, and I am very adamant that when you come into our space, my job is to present both sides to you, right? And then it's up to you to kind of take from that what works for you and implement that in your life. So I think I have clear boundaries there as far as how to present that. I think the authenticity in the workspace, I think it just depends on how comfortable you are in sharing your flaws and the downsides of your life. I think for me, I have had so many people that has motivated to, or that they have felt that they've seen themselves in me and my story, and that's where I want to connect. So to me, that makes it worth it when I share on that level of, oh, you understand where I'm coming from, you know my heart now, and I know yours. And I think especially in this climate that we have right now, where we can't walk into spaces and have different opinions, we've started what's called the Day of Understanding at Leadership Lancaster instead of, I think it was Understanding Differences. Because at the end of the day, I don't want you to understand how you're different. I want you to understand how you're similar. And so we use a concept called the Human Library, which is out of Denmark. Has anybody heard of this? Oh, that's one of my favorite things. This idea that you walk into a space and it looks like a library, and there's a list of books on the wall, and it might say what it's like to be bullied, what it's like to live with cancer, what it's like to be a gay man in the city. And you pick a book, and instead of reading a book, you are actually picking a human, and you sit down with that human and you listen to their story. And so they actually encourage you to pick a story that maybe you haven't felt comfortable with, or maybe that you have had a bias about. And there is something so beautiful that happens when you sit across from someone that you necessarily don't agree with or haven't understood, and you just listen for 30 minutes to their story. And at the end of that, it's so hard for people to dislike each other or to, be cruel to one another. I might not agree, and that's fine, but I know your heart now. And so we use that to kind of set up this space of vulnerability to your question of, like, how do we bridge that gap? And so it's truly by this story that we each share and carry with each other. And once I understand that, that's how we can transform communities.
Thank you. We have time for one more question from the audience.
Make it an easy one. These are good.
Leah.
Thank you so much for everything that you've spoken to us about. A lot of it has resonated with me personally, so just thank you for that. You speak a lot about community and the importance of it. What advice would you give to someone that might be nervous about networking or might be a little bit more introverted and not super comfortable talking to new people?
Mm-hmm. And I hear this a lot, and I have several of my children who are in that space. And again, I think I take it back to this idea of making those one-on-one relationships, because first of all, it's not as intimidating if you're sitting down with somebody one-on-one over a cup of coffee. We have these, you could go to a networking event every night out of the week here in Lancaster, and there's certainly value to that, but at the end of the day, you're really not getting a whole lot of relational capital out of that. And so it really is just taking the time to say, hey, could you sit down with me, have a cup of coffee, share a bite to eat, and there's no pressure in it. We all have a story, right? We all have a story to share, and I will tell you, people love to talk about themselves when you let them do it, right? So that's what my advice is, like, sit down and just ask a question and let them share. And then from there, it kind of just opens up. Yeah.
Thank you. I have one more question for you,
Yeah.
Jen. This one I did not send you beforehand, so I hope it doesn't take you off guard, but it's a question that your daughter would have been asked in the program.
Gotcha.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years, and what do you want people to say about you?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So I'm going to reverse it, because I think 5 years ago I would have answered the question and I would have said, oh, this is where I see myself. I think what I have learned over the last 10 years, I don't want to know where I'm going to be in 10 years, because I said it in the beginning, I really encourage people just to look at that next best step. If you're looking at that end goal 10 years out, you're going to miss all of the opportunities along the way. And I have a quick story if you want to hear how that actually plays out. So I went to Spain last year with one person in this audience, and my daughter Emma, big Gilmore Girl fans.
Oh,
so we
yes.
did the Europe
Yes.
trip. While I'm in Spain, I discovered this, it's called the Camino de Santiago. It's this 500-mile pilgrimage across Spain. And again, that voice, it's like, you need to do this. I'm like, so I go into a gift shop, I buy a map, and I'm like, okay. And when I always advise people, okay, so it's not like, okay, 10 years from now I'm going to do this. What's your next best step? My next best step, I came home, I bought a couple books, as I always do, and I joined a couple Facebook groups of women who were either doing it or had done it. In this Facebook group, by taking that next step, I see there's a woman from Lancaster that's doing the Camino in September. I reach out and just say, hey, would you like to have lunch? I'd love to hear about what you're doing. I sit down with her, we have lunch. While we're having lunch, she says to me, hey, we have this group of women, we're doing this triathlon. It's called Escape the Cape. This Olympics triathlon, you jump off the Cape May Ferry, blah, 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 you need to do this with us. So I went, okay. So I started, again, not even on my radar as something that I wanted to do, but because I was open to possibility and I'm just looking at that next step. So I signed up for this triathlon. I spent 7 months training for this crazy journey. I completed it back in June.
Congratulations.
So while I'm doing that, I also see that there is this thing that the Lancaster County Community Foundation has. It's called the Baldwin Fellowship. Yes.
Familiar.
And part of it is they give you grant money to go do a personal journey. And I thought, this is fantastic, right? So what's my next best step? I'm going to apply. Can't hurt. Like, well, all they can do is say no. And so I had applied for this fellowship. I had to wait about 3 months to find out. On Friday, I found out that I was accepted into the cohort. Yes.
Oh my
so
goodness.
In June of next year, I will be doing the Camino
my
de Santiago.
goodness.
Yes. So again, back to your original question, like I hesitate to have people like forecast out 10 years I want to be here, because you miss so much of these amazing opportunities that are going to happen if you're so focused on that end goal. So I would say just take that next best step and open yourself up to where the universe is going to take you.
Absolutely. And then what would you want people to say about you? I feel like you can definitely answer that.
Yeah. I think I just want people to say that I lived life to the fullest. Like truly, like I just don't want to leave anything undone. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.